Being recorded.
So, ladies, I have heard of the Switzerland story about a week ago, and it just puts me in such a rage. It just puts me in such a rage, it is hard to catch my breath. Okay. Whew. Let's listen to what this is.
The Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Look, let me say something as we cover a story like this. Staying on top of the news is so important, but with all the media bias these days, who knows what to believe? That's why we introduced you to our sponsor, Straight Arrow News. Straight Arrow News is a personalized news platform that gives readers fact-based journalism to inform and build trust. It's me and Miss School shows are so shocking. Insane story since the beginning. You can check it out. See, back to trustworthy journalism. Law and Crime has been following this absolutely insane story since the beginning. You can check it out. Sierra Gillespie covered it as well. The details are so shocking. They are almost impossible to forget, as much as you might try. We have an international model, a former Miss Switzerland finalist who was apparently strangled, dismembered with a jigsaw, and then police say her remains were pureed in a blender, all by the one person who should have protected her the most, her own husband. She was a mentor, a mother of two, and her life ended in an act of such brutal violence. Now her husband...
In case you don't know, like, he even looks like a good guy. You know, like when y'all claim, oh no, men are good. He looks like one of them, right? This is a guy that you would see on the street and you'd be like, oh, hey, how are you? Look at it.
Husband was arrested. First said he found her dead, then changed the story, claiming self-defense, that she attacked him with a knife. The evidence told a very different, horrifying tale, though. And now there is a major update. Prosecutors have just officially charged him with murder. We're going to dig into the new charging.
Do you understand why they're choosing self-defense? Because these things are liars, right? Because there is no evidence. There is no evidence that is too great for them to try to not brainwash anybody. This is why even when, with the evidence of you having pureed her and all of these things, right? He cut out her womb. Oh my God, that puts me in such a rage. That puts me in such a rage. He still calls it self-defense. He wants you, despite the abundance of evidence of his brutality, of the issue being murder, right? Likely premeditated murder. He wanted to believe that, oh, she was trying to kill me. I just defended myself. This thing of fucking creatures.
Documents, the chilling details they contain about what allegedly happened in that house. This is one of the most disturbing cases that we've ever covered. And it all centers on two people, Christina Jaksimovic and her husband, and identified in Swiss court documents and media as Thomas. There are Swiss privacy laws in place, so he's only being identified as Thomas. Christina was a 38-year-old from Binningen, Switzerland. She wasn't just anyone. She was a former model, a Miss Switzerland finalist. She had won the Miss Northwest Switzerland pageant back in 2003. But by 2024, her career had evolved. She was helping people. She had founded her own catwalking coaching business where she mentored aspiring models. We can actually hear her inner element coaching a young woman.
My name is Christina, the catwalk coach, and I'm preparing Natalie for her big show. Let's start with the first pose. If you want to look confident and sexy, take a step aside, turn, and lean back slightly. If you're wearing a dress, take one step ahead, lean back to highlight your legs.
In 2017, Christina got married. She and her husband Thomas, they shared two young daughters together. From the outside, they appeared to be a picture-perfect family living in an affluent area. And you know what? Just 4 weeks before she died, Christina posted photos online of a romantic couple's getaway at a luxurious hotel. But then you go to February 13, 2024. Everything changed. Christina's parents got a call from their granddaughter's kindergarten that Christina hadn't shown up to pick them up. So worried, her father went to the family home. Her husband was there. The suspect told Christina's father that he didn't know where she was. Allegedly told Christina's father that he didn't know where she was. Now, apparently, while Thomas was distracted, Christina's father searched the house, goes down to the basement laundry room, described as this isolated bunker-like space. And there he sees this large black trash bag with what looked like blonde hair sticking out of it. So he opened it. And apologies for how gruesome this is, but inside, this father, you know what he discovered? He found his daughter's severed head. Police were called, they arrived, they took over the scene. Christina's husband was arrested in connection with her death. But now, all these months later, we have a major development. On December 10th, nearly, 10 months after Christina was found, the public prosecutor's office announced that it had concluded its investigation and filed formal charges. Christina's husband has been officially charged with murder and disturbing the peace of the dead. All right, want to break all this down, want to get a legal expert on who has seen both sides of the court charge found. The public prosecutor's office announced that it had concluded its investigation and filed formal charges. Christina's husband has been officially charged with murder and disturbing the peace of the dead. All right, want to break all this down, want to get a legal expert on who has seen both sides of the courtroom. Criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor Safa Robinson-Ferrer. Safa, thanks so much for taking the time. I know this is a really, really difficult case to cover, but it hits on something that we've seen a lot in domestic homicide investigations, the changing story. From I found her to I killed her in self-defense. I don't care if it's a case here or abroad. From your perspective, as both a former prosecutor and defense attorney, how do investigators typically dismantle a case like that? I mean, how much is it a problem to say, well, you found her now, self-defense? You could, I guess, argue, oh, it was panic. He maybe didn't think immediately that someone would believe the self.
What puts me in further rage is that you even need to put this guy on trial. That even with the mountain of evidence, you still think that you need a trial. crazy. We have a system by which allows, by which criminals are protected and the innocent are not. Because what they based it on is, it is better that one innocent person not be, not be implicated by the system. Right? It is better than one innocent person not be implicated by the system, which means that you will now have to go to an extreme length to prove this and prove that, and then you have to give them all kinds of ways to get out of it. And then even when you have absolute evidence, you're still going to need a trial. This is nonsense, because this system only benefits criminals. It doesn't actually protect anyone. It doesn't actually protect anybody. And each of these males, each and every one of them, is exactly like this. Okay? Which means that we're basically what? We're basically surrounded by criminals. This is a system for them. This is a system that can never protect innocent people. This is a system that promotes predation. The lion is getting protected by nature like this. There is zero protection for the actual victims. This is why you have crime everywhere. It pays to be the predator. Which, of course, that makes sense when a system is set up by predators. Only thing they needed to test for is really DNAs, his DNA. They really should just test for his DNA, test for his fingerprints here and there, and then execute him. There should be no trials. There should be no trials. And then execute the bastard.
Defense argument. On the other hand, it doesn't appear that there's anything at this point to support that.
I think oftentimes in cases like this, the self-defense argument doesn't come into play until the defendant realizes that they've essentially been caught and that there are things that they can't explain away. For example, they can't explain away how their DNA was at the crime scene. And of course, maybe they lived together in this particular instance, but there's nothing that would indicate that anybody else could have committed the crime. The timeline of events with respect to this case are fully established, where the husband in this particular case, there couldn't have been anybody else but him as the perpetrator. There's no alibi for anything like that. Oftentimes in domestic violence cases, and we hear this a lot, investigators preliminarily look at the spouse, the husband or the wife, as a possible suspect, because unfortunately, oftentimes those are the individuals that are responsible for domestically related homicides more often than not. So that's where investigators will typically begin their investigation, have a conversation with this individual, and then that person, for whatever reason, says, oh, it wasn't me, I just found her there, because they haven't yet concluded in their mind what their best defense is going to be. And until they are caught red-handed, for lack of a better way to put it, by investigators, forcing them to say, well, yeah, I wasn't actually at the store, I was actually home because the ring camera footage shows them there at the time, then they have to start concocting something that is more so of a self-defense related theory for themselves. And that's where things begin to change. And it really goes to their credibility over time. If the cases make it to trial, then the jury is going to be able to see, well, initially they told us one story.
So all of you have a great husband. Okay. Can you write an insurance to yourself that your husband is not going to do this? Can you write an insurance to yourself promising that your husband doesn't have this? Because this husband who did this, yeah, he, for a space of, what is it, 7 years? They met in 2017, so that's 8 years, right? 8 years. He, for 8 years, pretended to be good. How do you know that yours is not pretending? How do you know that yours is not pretending? How do you know that your husband doesn't have this brutality in him? How do you know that? Can you write yourself an insurance certificate? Can you ensure that your great husband, your loving husband, isn't this sadistic, demonic creature? Can you promise yourself that? Because I'm sure you think that all these women that all these women, they just kept picking the wrong guys, exactly like how men want you to believe. But you have to tell yourself that, along with all this, all the wars that's happening in all these countries, all the gang wars, right? All the gang wars, all the cartel conflicts, right? All the industry, conflicts, all the mutilation of all the ethnic conflicts, yeah, yeah. That are being saturated by men, that are saturated by male violence, yeah. You have to tell us that this one, that this is an outlier. That this is an outlier. Inside the conglomeration of all of those, inside the conglomeration of the entire history that we know, in which we know that they have sanitized history. So the parts that we can hear, these are the clean versions. These are the clean versions of history. What about the actual version? What about the actual version? You're going to tell us that this is an outlier, and therefore this is not the normal male, right? Which is why it would be okay for you to be with one of them. This is not the normal male. So now I have a question to ask you. Can you ensure that for yourself? Can you provide self-insurance for yourself that your husband is not one of these? The husband has a different chromosome that makes him behave not like this. Can you ensure us that? So that we can shut up about it. All you, I have a great husband. I have a great husband. Listen, the history, when you say, how men behave like this, it is, they are mentally ill, it's how they were brought up, etc. Okay, if it's how they were brought up, or if it's the social programming in society, okay, what happened to history? Was this social programming always going on? How come women are not susceptible to this social programming? What about your males? Makes them susceptible to this programming, but females are not. What about it? What about it? What about males makes them susceptible to this programming? The women are not. How many stories? I have heard countless stories of 6-year-olds, killing a cat because he wants to see how life seeps away, how life just melts away when it's dead. He just wants to see how it feels to kill. How come your 6-year-old child, your 6-year-old daughter is not doing this, but your 6-year-old male is? Tell me, where in society are they teaching 6-year-olds how to murder rabbits? Where? Tell me where that is happening so that we can stop it. And how come your 6-year-old daughter is not doing that? I mean, what is it going to take for women to actually get it?
Then they changed their story once they realized that they couldn't explain away certain pieces of evidence.
To be clear, though, like we're talking about this in the middle of the Brian Walsh case as well. If there's evidence that significant other dismembered a body, mutilated a body, it's hard to even grasp somebody doing that. And maybe a jury would say, if they have the will to do that to somebody that they loved, potentially loved, it's not a far stretch to think that they murdered them as well. The other way of looking at it is, if you have evidence of dismemberment, it doesn't necessarily mean that.
Look at him. I'm so sorry. Look at it. It looks like a perfectly normal human. I mean, that's what you're looking at your husband and calling him, right? You're looking at your husband and saying, yeah, he looks like a human. Looking at your husband and saying, he looks like a human, therefore he must be a human. So how come, tell me, how come women are not doing this? How come women are not doing this? Hmm? Come when you go to Sudan, right? You can find men doing shit like this every day. Are these Sudan men? Do they have different genes? Do you think they have different Y chromosomes? When you see these males, these Western males doing the exact same behavior when there's no conflict. Huh? Are these Western males, the Western males have better genes? Is it a gene? Why is it genes? Why is it genes? Why am I even pointing to genes? Well, because how come women are not doing this? I mean, we all live in the same society. We all hear the same messages. How come women are not doing this? How come your 6-year-old isn't doing this? Of course, no one is teaching. Of course, no one is teaching 6-year-olds how to murder rabbits, right? So where did your 6-year-old get it from? If not from his head, that came with him. That came with him because of his genes. That came from his genes. You tell me. Do you think your Western males have different genes when they are doing the exact same behavior? Do you think in all the gene pool, of all the ethnicities, whichever one your husband is for, that the males of each of those ethnicities are doing the same exact behaviors on a daily, even whether there's conflict or whether there's no conflict, but you think that your husband must have some kind of special genes that excludes him from being like this? Meanwhile, he spent 8 years being the good guy. He spent 8 years being the great guy, the great husband. So where is your insurance that your husband is not like this? Where is your insurance? Is it? I mean, you refuse to take You refuse to accept the evidence they're playing out in front of your eyes. That if these males are behaving exactly like the Sudanese males when there is no conflict, right? The thing that they have in common is their Y chromosome. They are in very different parts of the world, in very different culture, in very different religions. They think that the only thing that they have in common is their Y chromosome. The males of history, the only thing this guy has in common with them is because is that they are, is the Y chromosome. They too, different religions, different culture, different countries, different nationalities, different ethnicities. The only thing he has in common with them that he's male. And your husband is male. Okay? So, and there isn't even any store that she was living in, at least, right? Maybe we simply haven't gotten there yet. The only thing they have in common is the Y chromosome. You are rejecting that because you've been brainwashed to think that, oh yeah, they're just mentally ill. Okay. If they're mentally ill, if it's a social condition, how come women don't have this mental illness? How come women are not starting wars, not being cartel members? How come we're not doing that? How come we're not beheading people and cutting out their wombs?
That person murdered the victim in this case, right? Particularly if the body is in such a state where you can't easily determine what happened to them, or there might be a situation where the body's not found. So as bad as this evidence of mutilation is, and I have to explore it a little bit more, and there is evidence, by the way, about what might happen to her, but as bad as the mutilation here is, and it's one of the worst I've ever heard in my entire life, it doesn't necessarily always mean that they're guilty of murder.
That's definitely true. And we have scenarios where, just throwing out a hypothetical, you might have someone coming home and their partner is deceased. Maybe there was some drug abuse or something of that nature. And because of that, and because they don't want to get found out about it, they don't know what to do, maybe if they participated in those things as well, then they try to conceal what ultimately happened. And there's a certain charge in certain jurisdictions called concealment of a corpse or dismemberment of a corpse and things of that nature. So sometimes, and I've seen on a very few rare occasions where they cannot prove that the defendant actually murdered the individual, but they can prove that the person tampered with evidence, dismembered the body, and other things of that nature. Because in order to convict somebody of a murder, there has to be an establishment of facts that this person intentionally killed this person and how they did that. If you've got dismemberment, if you've got other things that play, it may be difficult for a medical examiner to truly determine how that occurred.
But the problem is it's coupled with everything else the defendant does. Like, for example, here, okay, allegedly giving false information about what happened here and not telling Christina's own father what happened. I mean, it was Christina's own father who found the remains. When you hear that, how does it impact the case? Both in terms of, the emotional weight for a jury, but also the credibility it gives to the investigation. It gives to what this defendant was really up to. The father finds the remains, finds the decapitated head. That, I feel, is going to be a big factor that has to be considered.
Absolutely. And it's completely gut-wrenching. If a jury has to hear that a father, that a parent found their child dismembered in such a gruesome and horrific way, there's some sympathy that will likely enter into a person's mind for that father and for the victim here in this case. Now, a judge will always instruct, at least here in the US, that sympathy cannot enter your deliberations. However, jurors are human. And those
things they said about maybe he's not guilty of murder. Please, somebody, please help me. When has anyone not guilty of murder done stuff like this? I mean, are these people insane or what? I mean, this is the BS you expect when criminals are running the game, right? This is the kind of nonsense that you expect. There is explaining what happened to get the person dead is a far easier task than having to decapitate them. Did no one think about that? Did no one think about that? Having to decapitate them and cut out their womb. That is a far easier task. Why would you choose that task? Why would you choose the harder task? Are these people insane? Do you hear the creature? Do you hear the creature logic here? Oh, that's because she was. Doesn't mean that he actually did it, because he could have been, he could have been, he could have been participating in something that killed her, and he was just ashamed. BS. A normal human does not do this. A normal human does not do this. Males do not do this when they're not guilty. Even males do not do this. You do not kill somebody and then say, I might be too, I might be thought to have killed her. Therefore, I gotta do all of these things. That doesn't happen. That does not happen. And it's only creature logic like this, right, that would make it even seem like that's even plausible. God, I hate this world.
Emotions will come into play with that. Not only that, but I think that jurors are going to consider and think about it. We do know a little bit more about this case and the manner of how it happened. But jurors are also going to think about, well, if they lived together, why was the father the one to find her body in this way and not the husband? And if the husband found her in this way, why would he not have immediately called 911, rendered help, rendered some sort of aid, something to that effect? But again, going back to my initial point, was in these cases, a lot of times you see that the spouse is often responsible, and investigators look at the spouse because of the nature of these types of relationships.
Can you explain something to me? We have this significant time gap. What was it, 10 months between the arrest and the formal charges? I don't know that criminal law system very well, but from the outside, that feels very, very long. Based on your experience, what would be the reasons? What kind of maybe complex forensic investigative steps would be happening behind the scenes that would lead to a delay like that?
It's certainly a long period of time. However, the things that could come into play, and what probably has come into play here, is the forensics, it is the medical examination and toxicology reports on the victim. The likelihood is that because of the toxicology, because of the medical examinations that would have needed to occur in this case to fully establish the manner of death, the timeline of death, and all of those other sorts of things are
just look at the beautiful woman that was taken from this world, that was taken from her kids. Just look at her. In place of her is a demon that they're giving us excuses why he's not 6 feet on the ground right now. They're giving us 5,000 reasons why he deserves empathy and rights and trial and benefit of doubt. They swapped that creature for her. Or they swap her for that creature. That is the creature they are protecting. They are protecting the creature. The creature is the one who is getting protection here. How is it, do you think the war cannot be on a demonic level when you are protecting creatures and letting innocents die? How is it that you think that you can have a good world? This is impossible. This is impossible. It's impossible for you to protect the creatures and then expect your life to be good. Even these males who are saying all these things, who are protecting these other creatures, these are the same creatures who are going to kill them.
Probably the reason why this has taken so long. There are a number of tests and examinations that the medical examiners do in these cases, again, including toxicology, including a review of the body to determine, again, what that specific manner of death was. And I think here it was ultimately ruled to have be strangulation prior to the dismemberment of the body. So those are all things that come into play, and they take time. They do take time. So I think that's probably why we've seen that 10-month gap here. Also, the investigators have to do their due diligence.
The time that it takes and all these steps, like all the hurdles that you have to take, this is to slow down the system, so that you can never ever get justice. This is to protect the criminals. Because in order for you to gain, because between him and her, who would you want to be? You tell me. Who would you want to be? Would you want to be the dead one or the one who has all his rights? You tell me.
Was speaking to witnesses, piecing the timeline together, and really solidifying their case against the defendant. And those things also take time.
I want to start with the foundation of the prosecution's case. So it's the cause of death and what happened after. Now, the Swiss Federal Supreme Court ruling, reviewed by local outlet BZ Basel, details this horrific sequence of events. It states that after Christina was strangled, her body was dismembered in the laundry room using a jigsaw, a knife, and garden shears. And the court documents then describe how several body parts were subsequently shredded with a hand blender, that they were pureed, that they were dissolved in a chemical. I think this is the worst episode of dismemberment I've ever heard, of disposing of a body that I've ever heard. So we have the methods of killing, we have the tools, but the court's assessment of the accused's behavior, that is is what stands out, because they wrote that his entire conduct indicates a significant propensity for violence, that in some cases exhibiting what they called sadistic sociopathic traits. They noted he displayed a remarkably high level of criminal energy, a lack of empathy, cold-bloodedness after killing his wife. I can't say, Saf, I'm surprised by that conclusion, but what is that language from the court itself?
It's a fucking creature, because it is a creature. It is a creature.
To this case, what does that signify to you?
Not surprising from that conclusion either. And I really noted, and what really stood out to me was the criminal energy. And so for the court to make this type of conclusion tells me that they've done their own assessment to the facts of the case, maybe through a hearing or other information, documents and depositions that they may have reviewed, and taken in totality and given their opinion on the case. Now, again, in the United States, judges don't really do that. They might give some opinions, maybe in a chambers conference or things like that, on what they would do with the case if it ultimately went to trial. But the court here has made it very clear that this particular defendant has that sadistic propensity, has that criminal energy in nature. And so I think that there is a concern on behalf of the court with the direction that this case may go, and wants to ensure the integrity of the case and the integrity of any conviction that ultimately may come down.
And it seems they're making clear this is not somebody who was in a situation where they panicked and they just tried to get rid of the body. This part, I'm going to read you something else that really is, it's tough to hear. So the details from the autopsy report, again, is cited in the court's judgment. They became even more specific, because as detailed in a report from the Daily Mail, which cites the autopsy directly, it confirms the decapitation, but it notes a unique, deliberate mutilation. The careful removal of the victim's womb, which was the only organ cut out. And the court itself refers to this as evidence of what they call a deliberate mutilation or ritualized degradation of the body, which they believe indicates the appellant has a mental disorder. Let's start right there, Safa. Why remove the womb? I mean, that feels to me what escalates this, as if it couldn't even be escalated more, but what separates this from other cases.
It's definitely a significant question specific to the womb. Makes me think about or wonder if, in some type of enragement based off of maybe some infidelity or what type of crime of passion, or what would have invoked this individual to essentially cut out one of the most intimate parts of this woman. And considering that they are, or were married at a point, have children, that the level of just gruesomeness and attention to that particular area of her body really gives me pause as an attorney, and generally speaking, anybody pause to say, what would make someone do that? And again, to the court's point, the mutilation, the sadisticness, who would do that? But ultimately, looking into the state of mind of an individual who has the ability to do something like this is ultimately really at play in that question here. So all of those things are going to be taken together. The facts of the case as they've established it to be, the mental health or the competency of the particular defendant in this case, the nature of the relationship, which we know is domestic, any prior domestic evidence. We've got the fact that the father was the one that located his daughter. And so all of those things taken into totality will come into play with this case.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you need to understand something, right? Because the father kept coming up, right? The thing is that this father, as a man, he knows what males are capable of, right? He knows what males are capable of. And he thought that, yeah, it was totally okay for my daughter to marry that creature. You have to understand, right? This is why you do not need fathers. You do not need fathers, because if your mother, if this did not happen, if this, whatever it is that they did to us, if it didn't happen, right? You wouldn't have a father at all, right? Which means that when you see someone behaving the way this guy behaves, your hackles will have been up. Your hackles will have been up, because you will have realized something was not right with it. You have realized something was not right with it because the absent the presence of a father, right? There is also an absence of brainwash, and in the absence of the brainwash, what remains is the pureness of female nature, and the female nature and females are self-reliant organisms. This is our biology, because that is everyone's biology. Self-reliant. Every organism's biology is to be self-reliant, right? Which means that you would not, which means that when you see how males behave, so clingy and all these things, that they are red flags, you will have realized something was seriously off. This is what happens when you are in your right mind. It isn't just that, oh no, we don't, we're not with males, etc. and all that, and therefore that's what makes it right. When you are in your right mind, you see a lot of other things that trigger, that let you know that something is not, this is not how your species is supposed to behave, right? Not specifically in those words, right? You understand that this is a species, like there's a difference of species, right? But that what this person was just too weird for you to be around, right? That's how it would come off, that this person, what you're experiencing from this person is far too weird for you to be around. This is what would have happened. So without her having had a father, right? This is what would have happened. She would have been in her real mind, in her real state of mind, and in her real state of mind, she would have been seeing all the red flags of this man, and it would have made her be what? Cautious of him, not want to be around him, and it would all be because of what? Safety. And it's not even going to come out as though it is like, as though, yes, oh, I need to stay away from him because of my safety. It would just be that she felt repelled by him, right? She feels repelled by him, and that makes her go away. But it's not because that she's feeling threatened. It's just that it just the repulsion, the repulsion is like, it's like an instinct that kind of keeps you safe. It doesn't really it doesn't really make itself known that this is why you are repulsed, right? But more like, it kind of just works silently without you knowing why it happens. Like for instance, when you see somebody who's really, really burned, right? And you don't actually know their backstory, right? What you feel is the repulsion. The repulsion there is telling you to stay away from this thing because there is a design in you. There is a design in you that tells you what your species is supposed to look like. And somebody who is burned is not going to have the features of your species. And so the repulsion is happening to keep you from mating with this person because they don't look like your species. They look like another species, right? They look like another. When they don't look like your species, they default to being another species. Basically, that's just how your mind thinks about it. So that repulsion, even though you don't know why you're repulsed, it doesn't tell you why you're repulsed. You can't consciously say, "Oh my goodness, I don't like him because he might be another species," right? That is how the repulsion it works, so that it keeps you from this person, so that you don't accidentally mix genes, right? So that is the same repulsion that will have been working when she was if she was in her right mind and seeing all the ways that this man would have been behaving, right? As a male who can only behave as a male, right? That's how it would have been happening. She would have been getting the repulsion. She would have been getting the repulsion, but she wouldn't know what was causing the repulsion, only that she just wants to get away from him. And it wouldn't necessarily be about safety either, right? It would simply be this revulsion that is happening to her, and then that keeps her from mixing with him, whether socially or any other way, right? That's how that is designed. That's how that design works. That's how that design works. And that is yet again, the unseen danger of having a male in the home. The unseen dangers of having a male in the home, right? And if this man was a good father, right? How come he didn't see in this man what he knows is already in every man? How come he didn't see that part? How come he let his daughter mix with this creature? Huh? How come he didn't protect his daughter?
Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, the investigative findings noted that in the court documents that were reported by the Daily Mail state that while dismembering the body, the accused played YouTube videos on his phone. So while this is going on, it goes back to this part where they talk about a mental illness, right? Where they talk about that this could be evidence of a mental disorder. So how does that factor in? All of this, the brutality, the deliberate action, the meticulousness of this. I mean, if these allegations are true, are we talking a mental disorder? Some kind of defense of some kind?
It is very possible. There might be some type of psychiatric defense here, here in the United States, and particularly.
Let's go over that again, because they are feeding us a lot of BS right now. So again, you have seen men do this all over the country, all over the globe, all over history. There has not been a minute of time and a single space that they have not done this. Okay? So if they're doing this as a norm, why would him now doing it also be considered mental illness? Come on, y'all. That's like saying when somebody runs, right? And then you see another person run oh, maybe that person can, it's just really a rock star, right? Or maybe running is just normal. It's just a normal part of being a human. That's what that is. If they have given you evidence after evidence after evidence after evidence that this is who they are, then how can you say that this is mental illness? I'm not understanding what this logic is. If they've given you evidence after evidence after evidence after evidence after evidence after evidence that this is what they are, how come them being what they are is what you consider mental illness? This is not how mental illness works. Okay? This is not how mental illness works. This isn't how mental illness works. What they're trying to tell you is that it is not normal for humans to behave this way, which means that in the collective, the males are abnormal. Yes, that in fact is true. Yes, the males are in fact mentally ill if you're considering them in human terms. That is what they're trying to do here. They're trying to make them human, but I know that they are not. So I do not try to console them as though they are humans. Right? This is exactly who he is. He is behaving exactly as who and what he is. This is just a Tuesday for his species. Hell, this is 11 o'clock. This is what y'all do at 11 o'clock. This is nonsense.
In New York, we have what we call a 730 competency. Is this individual competent enough to testify? Can this individual formulate required culpable mental state at the time of the offense to establish the murder? Again, when you're talking about intentionally killing somebody, the prosecution of the government has to prove that that person acted with intent. If there is some mental health implications or some type of psychosis that is going on with the defendant at that time, that is going to be a hurdle that the prosecution or the government has to get over. Is can that required mental state be formulated if an individual has been under psychosis at that?
I'm actually going to end it there. I want y'all to realize this. What we are experiencing is not normal to the human race, but it is normal to them. And the reason it is normal to them is because they're not of the human race. Okay? And we can defeat this. We are not supposed to live like this. And living like this will have one eventual consequence, one eventual result. And that is our extinction, not theirs, just us, the actual humans. Not theirs, us, the humans. Just us. That is the eventual inevitable consequence if we continue down this path. Because the laws of predator are working, even though they have broken the natural barrier. They've broken the natural barrier of natural law, right? It's still working. It is still the natural laws are all still working exactly as they are designed. And one of them is the prey-predator dynamic, is the laws governing prey-predator. And the critical law is this. If you do not find a way to control, if your predator is not controlled somehow, you will extinct. That is inevitable. That is the inevitable conclusion of where we are going. That is the inevitable conclusion of where we are headed. If the predator is not controlled somehow by the prey fighting back, or by some forces of nature, right? Or environmental factors, or some other organism fighting back, the eventual conclusion is that the prey will extinct. Period, point blank. This is a universal law, which means it applies everywhere. The reason you can introduce a predator into an environment in order to control, something that is being a pest to you, right? It is because of this law. This law never fails. That means that if we do not want to extinct We must control these males. We must do it because only we have the capacity to do it. No other organism does. We must control them. That means all the talking, all the writing, all the, talking about what should happen, none of that is going to work. None of that is going to work. So if you want to know what is actually going to work, I want you to engage with me in the comments. I want you to engage with me in the, in the chat on Substack. I want you to engage with me because I can't just say it. Okay? We have to get information and fix this problem. Outside of that, the only thing I can say is God help us. God help us.